lit a fuse underneath me. This boy
It's
already
great.
recording?
Yeah, I think so.
Y'all hear me?
Yeah, you're recording already?
Yeah.
Okay. So we'll get straight to it since we are now recording.
Yeah.
So obviously this is our questions for this meeting. So I'll kick us off for question one. It says, identify and name your leadership X factor. Name and explain it, what it is, and define it. So what I chose was communication skills is my leadership X factor. Communication skills takes a certain type of person to be able to convince and relate to anybody that they talk to. This allows for a great leader to become, more skillful. When you have good communication skills, it allows for you to communicate better with your team, allows for your, like if you own a business, like say, like I do pools, like when you communicate with your team better, it allows for a faster progression. Good communication gets the job done, and then you can move on to the next one. So I believe that communication skills really just ups the level when it comes to leadership. I feel like there's a lot of good things out there that you can know that can provide other than communication when it comes to a great X factor. But communication skills with just other companies as well as the homeowner and as well as anything you're doing when it comes to, life ag related, that you can do a lot of good promotion with it.
Yeah, so I'm gonna go next, and I would say what I'm pretty good at for my leadership, my X factor would be also my communicating skills and being able to relate to others because like here at work, I'm having to meet new people that come in and understand where they're coming from and what how their mind works and be able to understand and talk to them and teach them in the way that they can understand so they can be a part of the group and be a part of the team and be able to help everybody and get the job done. And so that's something I would say I'm pretty good at because there's probably maybe a handful of people I've never been able to work with just because we don't get along, but majority of the time everybody gets along, and it's just the fact that I'm able to read them and understand, okay, they don't understand it the way I do, but I'm able to compromise and go into the form of where they'll understand and talk to them. And, that goes into dealing with, people that come out to visit and buy cattle. I'm able to relate to them and look at what interests them and, catch on to their likings and how they understand and read things and be able to catch their attention and, just communicate forward in the ways that they will be able to pick it up and, click in their head.
For sure. I definitely understand that.
Yeah. I think my leadership factor is kind of the same as y'all's, but I also like to include I also put inclusive, I think is mine. I don't think it's like a whole thing, but like I'm very inclusive with it, like and leading people to or try new things. Like I shoot trap and skeet like all the time. I'm hoping to do it for A&M this semester. And I got a bunch of my buddies back at home that don't really shoot that much, and I try and include them. Hey, you want to go out with me one day? I'll teach you how to do these things, and make them a better shot, and just to learn. And then and then I would say the communication one's probably the most important one because you have to communicate with them in order to like the right things. Tell them what they're doing wrong, or if they want to enjoy it, they'll tell you like, hey, I want to do this again sometime. But yeah, I think all those are important.
Cool. So we all kind of agree with everything, and we kind of, we all kind of combine ours to make like a good type of X factor that, really responds to when it comes to the leadership role. So we'll move on to the second question. So it says, share how you know that this is your X factor. What are your basic behaviors necessary to prove that this is your X factor? And then what are some, like, is it your cultural life or your life experience that help like shape basically how this X factor became yours? So I said, I mean, there's a lot of jobs that I've had that, are basically very relationship built jobs. Like you can be a very shy person and, be in the same job as me. But I mean, if you don't have good communication skills or if you don't have good, just being able to relate to someone like Rowdy said, I mean, you just don't do good in that job. So the jobs that I've had, I mean, I've upped so far into those jobs, as in like I've gone from the bottom of the barrel to manager positions just because when that person gets there, I'm able to talk to them, able to relate to them. They like me enough to where they want me to, be higher up in the system. So I think just, being able to put yourself out there and relate to that person, and basically the other separate part of that question that says like, how did you get there? I definitely say life experiences. My parents did not shelter me whatsoever. They made sure that I was a part of everything that they were doing, how they were doing it. They were making sure that I was going to be exposed to life of how it is, and like when we graduate college. So I know all the ins and outs and how you need to, respond to others to be able to make good relations with other people. So, I mean, even though you might not enjoy what you're doing, as long as you have good communication and good boundaries within those people, that you'll be in good relations with them. So, I don't know. What's the other, in other words? So, I mean, it's basically the same question. So, I think I put all of mine into pretty good wording.
So I guess the way I would know my X factors, my X factor would be through, I would say, behaviors. I don't, when people don't aren't understanding, I'm able there to sit there and listen, and then I'm not one to really get mad at them. I kind of teach them, and when it does get aggravating after a while that they're not picking up on it, but I'm not gonna jump on them or anything, especially if they're new, and it takes time for people to catch the whiff of things, and you get onto the schedule and stuff. So I would say my behavior, because they catch that I'm not mad at them, I'm just trying to help them, and it helps keep them relaxed, and it helps them want to listen more, and catch on to what I'm trying to teach them. And I would go on to say that would go on to life experiences. When I would start somewhere and I'd get in trouble or something, I'd mess up, I would, them older people, of course, they're gonna yell and stuff, but that's when I was just like, well, I'm not gonna listen to you, because screw you, kind of deal. But it kind of led me to, I'm not gonna yell at them, because I didn't like when I would get yelled at, and that I wouldn't really learn anything, and it would take longer for me to catch on to things. So it's just, I see it as a better way to go about it. Just sit down and talk with them, and teach them about it, rather than jumping the gun on them. And of course there are times where you got to jump on them, but it's different scenarios.
For sure.
Yeah, I would kind of say mine's kind of the same as y'all's. Um, I would think I'm just gonna jump straight to the like the cultural gender life. I think life experience is the most important thing for me, because my parents grew up teaching me everything about life, and you will make mistakes, and you like hey what Rowdy said about people jumping on you about make mistakes. Like, yeah, that happens to me all the time with, and sometimes I do it too to other people, but then I realize like I always made mistakes. So you can't get on people that are just trying new things. They are also learning at the same time. So
Yeah, I agree. I mean, we've all three of us have gone through, you know, the talking about from the parents, like we've gotten our butts chewed a couple times for doing mistakes, but if anything, it's made us, better people in ourselves. We understand that we've got to teach the same things that we were taught. And then we also look back and we go, okay, we can't get on to someone just as much as, our parents did to us, because we were in the same boat.
yeah,
So
Yeah,
we've
exactly.
got to we've got to be able to share what we learned, but also maybe in a different way as well. All right. So since we basically got the next question done, we will move on to three. So in what context will this leadership, like the leadership practice that we were talking about, will be used in school, like in our daily lives after school? So what I said, I mean, obviously with me and my dad's pool company, right? Like I will be using communication in everyday practice, like either on the phone with customers, on the phone with different companies that help my company succeed. You always want to have great communication skills, because I mean, if you don't have good communication, then any type of business doesn't succeed. I mean, you have to have that communication between everybody to make things run. I mean, the communication between workers. I mean, obviously, with the kind of workers that come through my kind of business, I mean, you have to make things very clear to them on how it should be done. So if you don't explain it the right way, then things might go south. So communication is a big thing when it comes to my job scenario, especially with the other side thing I would be doing is firefighting. So with being a firefighter, I mean, when you go into a burning building, you have to be able to communicate with others to make sure, you get out successfully. So with communication, I mean, it's the biggest part of my life and going to be a big part of my life. So that is kind of my answer to this question.
Oh, my bad. I zoned out. Okay. It says, well, how are you going to be doing it after you graduate? And, you're always going to be working, and that's just everybody, of course, unless you're raised into money, but, you're always going to be working. You got to make that money somehow. You got to be able to communicate to people when you're trying to sell cattle, you're trying to sell your product, you're trying to, put yourself out there. You got to communicate to the people and, pretty much sell whatever you're trying to get through. And, so that's pretty much, and I'm in the cattle business. My family's in the cattle business. It's been like that my whole life, and it's what I grew up in, and it's pretty much really all I know. And so I plan on continuing that, and so that's just where I plan on using that communication, and just teaching about the cattle breed or species, and leading the youth, especially because to me the youth is a big deal because that's the next generation after us, and so that's something I would want to pass on to the youth and the kids, and get that across to them and teach them, and hopefully continue everything that's going on.
Yeah, I would say communication's the most important thing for after college because, like what you said, Rowdy, about your cattle business and stuff, I have to do that with pheasant. I do a pheasant quail hunting guide stuff. So like I have to communicate like to buy birds, well these birds can be ready for the next 6 to 8 months. Are they gonna and then also with exotics too. Like if you're trying to buy and sell exotics, who's the right breeder to buy for, or do they have the right genetics? Like, I think communication plays a big role, I think, in life, like in general, and especially with business and jobs especially after life. So
Good deal. So that question, I mean, is pretty self-explanatory. I mean, everything that anybody says is their X factor is going to be used in everyday life. There's nothing out there that someone could say that they think is beneficial that won't be used in your reality. So we'll go ahead and go to number 4. So what three development steps would you need to complete in order to enhance your X factor? So what I said was active listening, nonverbal communication, and showing empathy and perspective. So for active listening, I put basically like when someone is like a customer is telling me their side of the story, I need to be able to listen to what they have to say instead of knowing kind of what I need to do for them. So kind of pulling in what everything that they have to tell me, like certain details, certain perspectives, be able to relate to them more on what they believe is right. Like everyone says in the real world, like, the customer is always right. Your your consumer is always correct when it comes to anything in your job life. So that is a big thing that I need to work on. I need to work on just understanding people individually a little bit more. And then when it comes to nonverbal communication, like just hand signals, facial expressions, everything needs to be shown in a way that like so when I'm talking to workers, I need to show, a good energy to allow them to have a good energy on the job site. Just things like that. I mean, it's kind of a weird definition to kind of put out there, but basically, I mean, just like any of y'all would know, I mean, if you go to someone and you want them to show, good vibes towards the job, I mean, you got to put that out there as well. So that's another thing that I wanted to say. When it comes to showing empathy and perspective, like I said, when it kind of come to active listening, you need to show that you care towards everybody else. Even if you want to kind of do things your own way, you kind of got to show that you put their perspective and empathy, like such as emotions, into perspective as well. So another example of mine when it comes to pools, you got to show that you understand that they like these certain details, that they like this kind of thing. So you kind of have to put that in perspective to show that, just to kind of move job sites along. I mean, when you make sure the customer likes that's going on, that it'll go a long way for your business as well.
So my 3 developmental steps would be, listening and nonverbal, and also reasoning. And I would start off with the listening because, like you said, you've got to be able to listen to whatever they're looking for, what they want, because It's like today, these people came by looking for commercial heifers and, just heifers that they want to throw out with a bull and not take to a show or anything. And, you got to be able to listen to them to where you know what they're looking for, not take them to show cows and, lose their interest and then end up being like, well, this isn't what we're looking for. You didn't listen to what, we told you we wanted. And, they take their business somewhere else to somebody else that's going to listen to them. And then nonverbal, like you said, you got to show them good emotions. You got to show them that you're a good vibe and everything. It's kind of like, what people always tell you, if you have your arms crossed when you're talking to someone, you're kind of closed off. And if you got your arms open and your hands moving, it shows that you're open and you're welcoming and stuff. So you're not going to walk up to somebody that's standing in the corner with their arms crossed. It's going to make you think they're pissed off or something. And, you walk up to them and they're going to punch you in the face. So, you do have to have a, good body position and, sit up straight and all that, just to show that you're present and you're listening and, you're open to listen and suggestions and stuff like that. My last one would be reasoning, because, you got to reason with people. You can't, force them into whatever your thoughts, your beliefs, whatever you're wanting and stuff. You got to reason with them and see, okay, this is what they're wanting and for this reason. And you can't, force whatever it is onto them. You've got to be able to, pretty much reason with them. I don't know how else to explain it. I think that's pretty self-explanatory. You can't really force anything onto somebody, especially if that's not what they're wanting. You got to be able to, discipline yourself to, relate to them and, come to an agreement with them.
For sure.
Yeah, I would say the same for me, from you guys. I would say that active listening for me was like you said, you have to be you have to be like focused and like in on the conversation. You can't be like looking around or on your phone while someone's speaking to you, or that just shows you don't have interest in what they're talking about or what they're trying to tell you. And I think the second one is important because like it kind of shows what I said in the first one, where like how Rowdy said, if your arms are crossed or you're not paying attention, it's gonna or you look mad, like you're not gonna they're not gonna want to talk to you anymore. And then I would say the third one is probably what was your third one again?
Mine was reasoning.
Okay, I would think with reasoning, if someone's like asking you or I don't know. I think reasoning's kind of hard, I think, for me, because
It's kind of hard to explain.
it really is hard to explain, but I don't know. I mean, that's pretty much all I got for those two, because reasoning, it's super hard to explain.
Yeah.
I mean, the only thing I could like think of when it comes to reasoning is like, I mean, being able to put your own opinions aside for what the person you're talking to has to say. I mean, because a lot of us in our head, like someone will tell you, like, hey, I think this is better, but in your head, you know that the other way is better. So reasoning is kind of like being able to take their perspective more over your own. In my opinion, that's my opinion on what reasoning has to be like, being able to go 50-50 on something, even though y'all both kind of have your own opinion.
A compromise.
Exactly. All right, so we'll move on to question 5. What are your strengths and who you are that will support success of your leadership X factor? So what I have to say is, growing up in a household of firemen, I have been put into a lot of perspectives as in having a strong backbone, being able to take criticism. So, growing up, I've had that constant, nagging, being able to create a better emotion towards like being a leader wise. Like if you're weak, you don't survive when it comes to reality in that leadership role. So I've always had that push to be better and better in life. So I'm super thankful of that. And then when it comes to, being bold enough. So as a leader, sometimes you have to make that difficult choice to be bold to go up to that person to tell them if they're right or wrong, just like Rowdy, I bet there's a couple of times that you're having to talk to people when it comes to buying cattle and it's like, hey, you're wrong about this, so you should probably do this, So sometimes you have to be bold enough to make those decisions in life to become a better leader. So that's another one of those things that I think, helps with my success. And another one is those is like I present myself very well. I use a lot of my manners, I always use manners with adults, a lot of older people, as in, older than us, respect that, because you don't get that nowadays. A lot of younger individuals like us don't have that respect towards their older individuals that allow them to gain that trust. So I'm always honest, I'm always open, I'm always well mannered. So I feel like that's a great positive also to anything you have to do with leadership in life.
Yeah, so I guess one of my strengths would be, I wouldn't even know where to start. The only thing I can think of and that comes to mind is, this friend of mine I used to work with. He told me one time we went to lunch, and it was a nice place, and the ticket came out to $45, and he ended up, when we went to go cash out, he paid him with $5, and the cashier was like, "Thank you," and I was confused because, like, is there a discount or something? And he looked at me when we got in the truck, and he said, "Always remember this." He said, "Quiet people don't eat." And I kind of sat down for a little bit, and I couldn't understand what he was saying until, finally it clicked. You got to talk to get yourself out there for people to know who you are. You got to throw yourself out there and come forward with, what you believe in and stuff like that for people to understand you. And, if you're quiet, nobody's going to know who you are. Nobody's going to know anything about you. You're never going to sell anything. You're never going to get anywhere. If you just sit in the corner, or hide under the table, you're not going to be anywhere, because, people aren't going to listen. They aren't going to see you, because, when you hear a noise, you look and you check out what it is. When everything's quiet, you're not looking around. You're looking straight, and that's kind of how it is. You got to talk for people to look in your direction. You can't be quiet, and people walk by you not knowing you're there. And so that's the only thing that really comes to mind is, I like to talk and tell people what I believe in, and you know show people who I am, and that's really the only thing that comes to mind for that question.
For sure.
Yeah, I would agree with all of what y'all are saying. I'm kind of more of the same with what y'all said. I think that manners are very important in this world, and especially if you're trying to, trying to get a job or trying to start something with for yourself. And I think that um, just what y'all were saying is pretty much what I would say too.
No, yeah, I mean, when you have two other people going in front of you, we kind of cover a
Oh
lot of
yeah,
things.
yeah, but
So I mean,
I think we can all agree though on everything pretty much.
no,
Yeah.
absolutely. I mean, we all kind of have like the same common, perspective on things. Okay, so next question, number 6. What are constraints that may hinder successful use of your leadership X factor? So obviously with communication, with the pool jobs, is the first example I'm going to use, is basically your language barrier. Like, I have a lot of people that speak Spanish on my job site, so that is a huge communication difference. Like, obviously they don't understand everything you're getting across. So I use a lot of, you know, Google Translate on my phone, show them, even though it takes extra time, at least they know what you're talking about instead of just kind of guessing. So that's one of my, little bit of a pushback on me when it comes to communication, is like just that I'm not bilingual. So it's very hard for me to be able to communicate all the time with these guys. And then the second thing I'd have to say is, when it comes to, communication wise, is the cultural difference. Like, obviously everyone has like their own way of going about things. Like, we have our own slang, you know, more of the Spanish speakers, they have their own slang. So everything comes across a lot different. So when it comes to me, it's like you want to put it in a way that everyone understands, but in a very like graceful kind of way. Cause obviously, like, I think all of y'all maybe talked to some different people that, even in our own type of culture, people take things the wrong way. When it comes to text messages, people take things the wrong way. So when it comes to communication, you always want to make sure that you're putting it out there in the way that you see fit. So even over text messages, like emojis, things like that, you've got to be able to come around where you can, overcome that difference. So those are kind of the only things that I can think of in communication that could ever kind of push back on you.
Yeah, so I would say my constraints would probably be, I'm gonna be honest, it'd probably be listening. It's kind of hard. You gotta to communicate. You've got to listen first, because you've got to listen to who you're talking to. You've got to understand who you're talking to, and everybody's got their own perspective on things. Everybody's got their own likings, and so it's like when somebody comes to look at a cow, they may like the ugliest cow in your pen, but to them it's the best one in your pen, and and then you start pushing other cows on them, and you kind of get away from listening to what they're liking, and understanding what they're liking. And so I would say that's something that pushes back, you know hinders my leadership deal. So that's pretty much mine, would be the listening deal.
I would say probably for me, probably is kind of focusing, because like sometimes like when there's like so many things going around, like it's kind of hard to focus on one thing. But yeah, I would say that probably trying to focus and like multitask because I like multitasking and trying to get like a lot of things done at once. But sometimes you have to like put the brakes on focus and be like, okay, do what you're doing right now and don't worry about what's next. Like finish what you're doing and then move on. Don't rush things. Which is something I do. I do rush a lot of things and I shouldn't, but that's something that may constrain me.
No, yeah, absolutely. I mean, we all kind of have our own nicks, with everything that we're talking about, we all kind of know what we need to work on and kind of things that we need to learn how to accomplish better. But at least we know it. At least we know what we need to work on. So obviously we'll move on to our last question. So it'll be identify one component of the relationship leadership module and share it how it best relates to your X factor. So I would have to say that purposeful is going to be mine because the definition on the PowerPoint says you have to be able to collaborate and find common ground with others to facilitate a positive change. So to me, that screamed communication because you have to be able to talk to the person that you're communicating with to be able to, you know, make that next step in whatever you're doing. So if you don't have that good communication, you're going to make a negative change instead of a positive. So it goes all back to what we've been talking about. All my examples are about what I'm going to do after this. So, everything you do in production wise when it comes to pools and all that is that communication. I mean, you always want to make that positive change and things. You want to have that good communication and you want to make that next step forward instead of step backwards.
Yeah, so identify one component of the relationship best relates to factors into the makeup of it. I'm sorry, my head's flustered right now. We've got some,
No, you're good.
and
It's been long. It's been a
it's like
long.
Jackson gonna say multitasking. My head's everywhere else, and trying to keep up with everything around. But purposeful, I would say you've got to have a purpose. You can't just talk out of your butt or whatever. You've got to be on point about what you're talking about, and you can't make things up, because what, the truth always comes out and it'll catch up to you. And you told somebody something, and it's gonna come out that never happened, or it was never true, or something. It catches you in a bind or something. And so you've got to lead with the purpose. You've got to talk with the purpose. You've got to listen for a purpose, and you've got to reason with the purpose. Everything's got to have its reason. Everything's got to have its purpose. Everything is there in place for a reason. And I guess it all kind of just circles around to each other. To you've got to have the reason. You've got to back up what you believe in. And when somebody asks you why, you've got to just you shouldn't even have to think about it. Just come up why, because it's instilled in you, and that's going to be your reason and purpose for it.
Absolutely.
I would say my component from the model is probably, I would say, inclusive. Because like I said earlier from question one, is I like to include people on things I like doing, like showing people what stuff I like to do with my time, and show them how cool it is or fun it is to do, or how, I like to include people in ideas that I think are useful or benefitable. So, but yeah.
Cool. I mean, basically all these questions always add up to reality, like what we're going to do after this and how we're going to do it and like what things we're going to change to make everything better. So I believe that, all of us have our different nicks and different knacks and what we need to improve on, how we're going to make it better and things that we're going to make useful in reality. So, I mean, all of our questions were great. I mean, that's pretty much all of them, unless y'all have anything else that, I might have missed. I mean, I think I went through all of them. But I mean, I think it was pretty positive. I mean, I think it was pretty good.
Yeah. I'm
Yep.
going
And
to
if you
I'm gonna go ahead and stop
go,
recording it real quick.
yeah, go ahead.